I've got an amazing day today to work on a canopy to create some shade for the water tank. And I'm going to use some post and beam sort of techniques. It's pretty simple construction. It's sort of my pole barn on top of a set foundation idea that I'm going to hopefully use on the garage down here and the cabin as well. This is completely remote, so there's no power up there. So I'm going to use solar panels. I'll get those set up first. I'm going to use modern techniques to put together a couple timber joints using pressure treated wood. This is a canopy that's going to be out in the elements, and I've seen from some of our other structures, those seem to fare really well here as long as you've got metal roof and coverage over them, and I've got a metal roof to go up on top of it. So get started today, but first I need to kind of build my workshop. I've got a couple trailers to work with. You'll see how I'm going to set those up. I don't have the tractor, and that is another video coming. The tractor is not available right now for various reasons. It's off at the doctor's office. I'll explain that in a future video, but for now, I'm going to get set up with this, use the van, and build my workshop, and then we'll get started. I've got the little trailer converted into its sort of workbench mode, which I'll put a link down in the description. You can see the various modes that this little trailer, which is super handy, can be used in. And I've got two 100-watt solar panels and sort of a little 1 kilowatt charging brick. And this brick and these panels have been able to keep up with me when I'm doing cement mixing and running power tools and other stuff. So it's been really nice. Has to be sunny, and it will work in sort of a semi-cloudy day, but it works best when it's sunny. Got the rest of my tools out, and because I've got that power, I'm able to use just regular conventional tools that I have around, and that's really nice. I don't have to do everything battery operated, but where I can, I use battery operated stuff, get everything loaded up, and head on up. I should note there's a critical flaw in this plan that you're going to see, and it's kind of funny actually, so keep an eye out for what could go wrong here. When I went to edit this, I thought it was pretty funny, and it's kind of nice to be able to laugh at yourself. Anyway, I went, and the charge brick suffered its first drop test, which it came through with flying colors and kept working, thankfully. I needed to grab the materials, the wood and everything with the second trailer, and that was all stored underneath this loafing shed that has been really amazing how dry stuff stays underneath it. So I think this thing I'm building, this canopy, is going to be very similar to that in construction and hopefully help keep the tank. The tank doesn't need to stay dry, but it does need to stay shaded. And this has been a really good instructive way to look at what materials survive well in this kind of marine climate here on the Pacific Northwest coast. You may notice that I was also careful to tie this load down. So I had a spectacular day to work with, and I let the batteries charge up a little bit in the solar brick and the sun, and took a break myself and got myself charged up so that I had plenty of blood sugar to get started now that I had what I hope was everything up here at the work site and kind of a workshop set up. So with all the players charged up, I set out to get the 4 posts that hold up the whole canopy out and start looking at the measurements of those. I want to make sure that the pressure-treated end of these that I do not cut sits down low, because that's the most likely place to rot where it meets the bracket in the pedestal here. But I pulled out the tape measure, checked them all. They needed to be trimmed down, got the chop saw out, and then I ran into a bit of a problem when I used the chop saw. I had not yet used this saw with the solar generator, and it looked like it was over capacity because it was cutting out. And I messed around with it for a little bit, tried it a couple more times, and then I found what's called a boost mode in the generator, and that kind of gives you double the capacity, I think, at a slightly lower voltage. And that actually prevailed, and I was able to start making cuts, which was great to learn. Each of these 4 posts gets cut to length, with the 2 lower ones being 10 feet tall and the 2 taller ones being 12 feet tall. And then I need to kind of carve pockets on either side to create sort of a beam that goes across as part of my post and beam structure. I used the electric chainsaw to kind of do chainsaw art and rough these things in so that I had most of the material hogged out. And then I used a jig that I had built for this purpose. I used it also in that plywood laminated frame video that I did for the workbenches. It's just super handy for creating these pockets and getting them nice and flat. So I didn't quite know what this new router bit would do in terms of the distance. So I did one cut first just to kind of get it started and figure out where the offset was. And then I could use that to measure out and accurately cut the rest of these. And so I went through and I cut each pocket first with the chainsaw carefully to knock out most of the wood, and then came back and chased it with the router and this jig to clean them all up. And this actually worked really well, and I'll use this on the garage for all the posts there as well. Once I had it all adjusted, then it was just sort of an assembly line to run through and cut out all the rest of the pockets. And again, this worked really well, and it went much quicker than I sort of expected, so I look forward to using it on the garage. So next up is some braces for the corners in the back, and these are going to be done out of a 4x4. So I first trimmed it up with angles to size. And then I finally succumbed to putting in a new blade in my saw after using the same one it came with for many years, and it made just a world of difference, so go get a new saw blade. Since I only needed to make 2 of these joints, I didn't make a jig or anything. I just adjusted the skill saw and then did sort of the 1,000 tiny cuts approach to whittling, and made a bunch of relief cuts and then chiseled out the rest and ended up with a pretty smooth little corner pocket. And like I said, I only need 2 of these. This is one of 2 braces that form the lateral stability for the back of the canopy, and I think you call this a blind tenon. And I went ahead and cut this piece in half, cloned that other side, and made 2 of the same thing. I once again have to laugh at myself while I'm editing here, because this is the point at which I realized I had cut the tenon on the other side of the same board. So I had a third one that I needed to cut, and I got a little bit of extra practice. With those done, and they looked pretty good, I switched over to the other sides of these, and these just need a simpler version of this that's going to sit between 2 2x6s that act as sort of the beam across the posts. And so these I cut out the same way, and they went pretty quick. So with those braces done, I needed to focus on the pockets that had mortises to receive those tenons in the 2 posts. And so I lined the 2 posts up, and then I set about cutting the mortises. And I used a combination of the chisel and the oscillating tool or fine tool to plunge cut. And that ended up being a little easier than I feared it would be, making pockets. They had sort of a 45-degree side and then a flat bottom. And it just took some fiddliness and some whittling to get them to work, but they're going to be super strong joints. These ended up being a little bit custom one to another, so I numbered them and moved on. Well, it's getting late in the day, and I'm gonna go ahead and pack it in for tonight. I'm just looking at the charging brick here, and I had to move the trailer around a couple times to sort of chase the sun, but I started the day with something like 42% charge, ran the tools throughout the day as I was working, and it's at 55 now. So this thing's just awesome for doing this kind of stuff remotely. I've got all the fiddly bits done, all the joinery and stuff, and so now I think it should be fairly quick work to put up these poles tomorrow. Famous last words. And I do want to apologize to anybody that actually knows how to do timber framing, because this is me learning. Now, what was I doing? That's right, I'm building a canopy. So I started by laying out my posts and marking where the cross braces are going to go, because it's much easier to measure them flat here and compare them to one another than when I'm doing it when they're stood up. So I got everything prepared before I could start standing up the posts. These posts hold up beams that sandwich the posts. While the sun was coming up here, I cut those out and got them all prepared. I want to taper the tails of these, mark them up, and do everything I can on the ground so that when I put them up, I don't have to do any measurement or anything up in the air. So I'm getting close to being able to erect the posts, and so I needed to measure the brackets just so they had sort of an as-built measurement, and I could transfer that to the cross pieces so that once I was up in the air again, I didn't have to worry about getting everything square. I just had to hit my marks. So I double-checked my measurements, and then I prepared a couple braces because I'm going to be standing these posts up alone, and they probably freestand, but I wanted to be able to make sure I could brace them so that I wasn't worried about it while I was running around doing other things. So with everything prepared, I tried to do the best I could to organize my tools so I could reach everything once I had this thing standing up, and went ahead and put the first beam up. And they're not super heavy, but they are something that I wouldn't want to fall on me, and they were pretty stable when I set it in the pocket, so it was really just a matter of getting it sort of leveled in the one direction that I can worry about with the brace and getting it squared that way, and then I'll worry about the other orientation once I put the cross braces in. That all seemed to work pretty well, so I repeated the same process for the other side, and I had the first two posts up. I took a piece of scrap wood and screwed it into the post just so that I had something to keep track of the beam from the other side when I was working on it, so since I was putting it up by myself. So now I have a temporary parallelogram, and I'm going to just take a piece of form wood here, a 2x4, and just screw it in the middle and pivot it out, and I can square it that way and get the frame squared so that I can put in the braces and not worry about that dimension while I'm putting them in. Since everything's square, I can just worry about getting the brace joints nice and tight and put it in, and I'm letting it sit in the pocket down below, and then I'll just pin it with a screw up on top and get this side done, and then go over and do the other side. And then with those in place, I can flip around to the other side of the beam and put the second half of the beam in and sort of sandwich everything I've just put up. This second beam had to go on top of the braces just because it would sort of captivate them, and everything lined up pretty well, and it sat right on the shoulders of everything, so it looked good. The second beam I'm adding has a bit of crown in it that I've got the crown pushing up, and so I tied on a lever arm here and with some screws, and you can see I've got the level there, and I just pulled down on that until it was level so that they were even, and then pinned everything in place with it like that. So the bad news is I forgot to pick up these grade stakes when I was leaving from the cabin this morning. But the good news is I was able to get my snack so that I keep my battery charged up. The battery right now is sitting at like 52%, so it's increased a bit, and it's got good sunlight now, so it should just continue to get better. I'm gonna reload here and rethink this bracing just a little bit. This brace worked great for this. So the triangles formed by those pieces that I pocketed yesterday, those are gonna keep it from racking really well. The braces here are keeping it from going forward and back right now under construction, and I need to get them out of the way for these pockets so I can run the other hoop up here. So I'm going to drive these stakes in and put some outriggers and hold it in steady there. There will be a triangle between the back and the front, you'll see, and that'll help the whole system from racking forward this way. The back one is there, and then the membrane of the deck and the metal roofing and everything will help keep it from sort of twisting and going into a parallelogram when viewed from above. With my new outrigger braces installed, I was able to take the old braces and repurpose them for the other side that I'm going to be hanging up next. So the front part is 12 feet tall instead of 10 feet tall, but everything else is the same. So I put up the posts, put in the cross beam, and then braced that. And then there's two laterals that go from the front to the back on each side, and I went ahead and placed those in. I had measured those out earlier, got those in place, put in the interior beam, got everything pinned down, and had sort of the basic box set up for the canopy. So with the frame roughly put together, I cleaned up a little bit and then set about doing the rafters. And the rafters are sort of 7 identical pieces. So this is a little bit of assembly line thinking about how to build them all to be exactly the same. And they're all built out of 2x6s that are just cut and fashioned to fit inside those beams that we built earlier. So I had calculated the angles and I went ahead and just cut them all to length and got them all stacked together so that I could work on them kind of as a group. I got all the rafters lined up so that I could make the same cut and affect all of them in the exact same place, and made sure they were all resting on a 2x4 so they were all even and sitting flat. I spent some time gang marking these up, and I did 2 marks for 2 things. The 2 cuts for the beams were important. There's a little angled cut for those. And then I marked off where all the purlins are going to sit up on top when I'm done, so that when I get up on top of the roof and I'm putting in purlins, I've already marked off where they're all going to sit, and they're all matching. With all my layout done, I took the board that was in the least good condition out and then made my cuts on that as sort of a test piece and tried to fit it, and I was exactly off by 1 inch, so I'm glad I tried that. And so I have an extra board, I put it in and marked it up, and then went ahead and did my gang cuts for everything.
God have mercy on us all. May God have mercy on us all. Oh, sister, let's go down to that river there. Bathe in that cool water. Forget about all our cares.
Since my test piece was a mistake, I went ahead and flipped this over and marked out the purlins on the one piece that I had to replace, so they were all matched and even. I'm not sure why it's called this, but they call it rolling rafters, and so then it was just a matter of bringing each of these up, setting them in place, and sort of clamping things and putting a backing block so that I could hammer in the hurricane clips that are holding these things down. And as I get up on the roof later, I'll secure these a little bit better, but right now I'm just tying them all in nice and tight against those notches I cut.
May God have mercy on us.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I'm tired. The battery pack did a lot better than I did today. I think it started with 42%, something like that, and it's up to 99%. And I started with a full battery and I'm trashed. So got all the framing up. It worked well. It's super windy, so I don't want to get up there with metal today. I have to head home, so I'm going to run a couple of these boards through the table saw so that they've got the rake angles I want for the sort of fascia boards in the front and the back, and that'll make the purlins a little bit easier. So I've got to deck it with purlins up on top. I've also got bolts and hardware to go in all these joints, and right now everything's just kind of pinned with construction screws, and that'll be fine for the short term, but I've got big bolts that I'm going to run through there. It'd be nice to get those done, but I've got a couple of cross braces in here. It'll stay put while I'm gone. And with no roofing on it, it should be just fine. The next steps will be to put those purlins in and get the roof up there and wrap this up so that the canopy's done. And then I can put the tank in and start plumbing it. So for the plumbing, I need to make sure that everything's kind of encased, and I've got a way I'm going to do that that'll be pretty hardened, so that it'll be kind of fun to show you how that works. It'll hang off the side of the tank here, and should allow me to, you know, have an overflow and an input and everything without having any wires exposed or anything that the perpetrator can get a hold of. There's a vast conspiracy to tear stuff apart here, and I thought it was the bear, and then I learned, I'll show you a video of who I think is actually doing the damage. So thanks again for watching. Take care.